Welcome to the NFP Podcast, where we explore the empowering world of natural family planning. I'm Amy Smith. Join me and my co-host Emily Appledorn each week. Together, we're here to dive deep into the science, the stories, and the spirituality behind NFP. Every week, we push back against the free love culture and advocate for a culture of responsible love, where intentionality and respect are at the forefront of family planning. Join us as we discuss everything from the practicalities of charting and fertility awareness to the profound impact NFP can have on relationships and communities. Whether you're new to NFP or a seasoned pro, our podcast is your go-to resource for honest conversations, expert insights, and real-life experiences. So grab a friend, settle in, and get ready to be inspired. This is the NFP Podcast. Welcome back to the NFP Podcast. Emily is with me.
Hi.
Again this week. Hello. So I know we talked about maybe doing a different topic, but this IVF is just all over the place in the news, and I've seen it on a ton of podcast topics and laws. There's legislation now.
Yeah.
So you sent me that thing about, so anyway, I was like, well, I think we're not experts, but pretty knowledgeable in what IVF is and alternatives. And I think we can connect it with, NFP. So I just thought, let's address this topic and have a conversation and see where it goes. And maybe provide people with some really good resources. Because that's the thing I think too is, people may pursue IVF because they're not able to get pregnant and they're told this is my option.
Yes.
And you and I are both privy to a lot of other options that maybe they can consider if their goal is to have a baby and they're having a hard time with it. So let's just start, I guess, with what IVF is.
Yeah.
So IVF is the use of ovulation stimulating drugs to grow follicles, then those inside of a woman, right? So follicles are grown. They give medication to grow follicles. Now, I use this medication, and I got pregnant with the twins. It's the drug I use. I don't know what all the drugs are, but the drug I use is called Menopur, and so it stimulates follicle growth. So then what happens is once the follicles have reached the size of maturity, they are extracted via a needle-guided ultrasound procedure where the needle goes up the vaginal canal. They extract the follicles from the ovaries. Then in a petri dish, they take the follicles that were grown, and they have sperm that was collected from a male sample, and they put the sperm into the egg, and they then create embryos, which are babies. So it's a human at the embryonic stage of development, which is your first stage of development at conception. And then those babies kind of hang out in the petri dish for a little while as they mature a little bit and they grow and they observe them. I think that's it. They also do genetic testing at that stage too sometimes, right, Emily? And then once they found the embryo that they want to implant or embryos they want to implant, sometimes it's more than one, they'll take those embryos and then through another procedure, they will take and at the same time those embryos are doing, the woman is getting hormonal treatment because now they're trying to make her uterine lining supple so that the baby that they implant will attach to the uterine lining. Basically, they're doing everything we talked about before in the episode describing like the menstrual cycle and how conception happens and how all this happens. They're just doing it outside and they're trying to manipulate everything to make this work. They know how the system works, so now they're just trying to do it.
Yeah.
And by they, I mean like doctors. So anyway, these follicles have been met with sperm. Now they're babies in the embryonic stage. They test them. They're growing a little, and then they put them back into the woman after they feel like her uterus is at a good supple stage to receive them. And then they hope that a baby will implant, and then that baby will make it to 38, 39, 40 weeks to full gestational age, and then she'll be able to have the baby. So the effectiveness rate for IVF, I'm going to look that up while we're talking. I'm trying to think where to start. Do we start from, the process and why the process? Well, I feel like it's obvious. Maybe it's obvious. It's obvious to me. So I shouldn't say it's obvious. It's obvious just because I've and reading a lot, is that this, based on what we know, what we've talked about, the marital act, that it images who God is, that it's sacred, that life has to be created within that context. That's why IVF is morally illicit, morally wrong, because human life can't be created in a petri dish. It has to be created through an act of love, because that's who God is. So that's one of the main reasons why IVF is so wrong. Another reason why IVF is so wrong is, well, it's outside of the act. Also, it's the creation of multiple babies, multiple humans. And then not all of those humans are put back in for the possibility of implantation, and therefore they're aborted.
Right.
Or in some cases, people will create multiple babies and then they'll freeze the babies.
Right.
And then they'll go back and they'll just implant one baby at a time, which is, it's safer. We just know it's safer to just have one baby at a time. It's safer for the baby. It's safer for the mom. Obviously, multiples happen and everything can be fine, but it's always singleton pregnancies are always preferable to multiples for many reasons. So they'll do one at a time for that reason, perhaps, right? They just want to try one baby at a time. So they'll put other ones in a freezer, and then they'll go back to them when they're ready to conceive again, because this couple is operating outside of what a traditional healthy fertility couple would do, right? Is a couple with healthy fertility will just come together and have intercourse when they want to have another baby. But this couple, when they come together and have intercourse, they're not conceiving. And so they do it this way. So it's like, okay, well, now we're ready for, baby number 1 is about 2.5, 3. We're feeling like we definitely do another one here. So let's go to the freezer and try another implantation. Okay, so I found the success. So that's, that's another reason why IVF is so not good. Bad language there, but because of the freezer aspect or the throwaway aspect. We've got one baby and we're done. So maybe we created 10 babies, but we don't want those babies. We just wanted one baby. And, maybe some of those babies have genetic abnormalities or some other developmental issue. And so we're just going to, I say, quote unquote, throw the baby away. But in essence, that's what's happening. Before you chime in, Emily, I just wanted to read this off. So the statistics for IVF, if for younger women, it says, let's see here. So from the Mayo Clinic, it says about 15% works to conceive, and about 15% of the 15% pregnant. Where is it? 20 to 35% is the effectiveness rate, which
that's
costs a ton, right? Doesn't it cost like $12,000?
So I'm of the understanding that the success rate is very generous. From what I've heard, research-based, when I learned or when I was taught on how to teach the Creighton model method. And the reason this came up during that instruction was because ethically, we cannot teach the Creighton model method to couples that intend to use in vitro fertilization. So we were taught about effectiveness and cost, and this would have been more than 5 years ago, so I'm sure things have changed. But when thinking about all of the decisions and choices that you're faced with when doing in vitro fertilization, and I've never done IVF, so I am not speaking of this from a personal experience, but I understand in a couple that wants babies, that desire is so deep. And so when you're not given options in a doctor's office, you're not achieving pregnancy, or maybe you're achieving and you're having multiple miscarriages or even one miscarriage, you're not given options for how to have healthy pregnancies or to get to the root cause of what's going on. You're just being told or funneled towards this fertility clinic. And so, to no fault of your own at that point, you're just doing what your doctor says. And then you get to the fertility clinic and you're faced with so many different different choices that just can lead you to one more thing that maybe you didn't think about. And so I think what I hear or have heard multiple times is, yes, like you said, fundamentally, we can know that IVF is wrong. I think fundamentally because it takes God out of the act, right? It takes everything outside the body. And that is very obvious, as we were saying, in my opinion. But then the things that come from that, the fact that it is highly abortifacient, where many, perhaps, I shouldn't say many, multiple babies can be discarded because they're not perfect when they're created. Maybe there's something wrong in that process, or the embryos are just not ideal. And then, so there's that. And then, just as you said, the idea of the babies being frozen, most people are not thinking long term about that idea. And I've sat through a seminar spoken by a priest from the Diocese of St. Louis, and he helps couples that come to him in these later years where they have babies that are frozen. And just the idea of what is morally and theologically correct on what to do. And there's no end that justifies the means in those instances. And it's really hard for couples to sit in that space, from what I understand, when they have these healthy babies. Praise God that they were able to achieve through IVF, but maybe they still have more babies that are frozen. And so it just leads you to all these other scenarios that perhaps you weren't expecting when you originally had that deep, deep desire to have a baby. And so I just don't think couples are coached or educated on all the things that that come from these decisions to pursue, trying to achieve pregnancy in this way.
Right. And so looking up, it looks like the effectiveness rate, or the rate of achieving successfully achieving and then having a live birth. So that's the other thing too. You have to remember, like, it's not just achieving a pregnancy, it's also getting to the end goal, which is to have a baby 9 months later. So that is dependent from what I'm seeing with IVF, just like with actually fertility awareness methods, or what they call restorative reproductive medicine. It depends on a lot of factors. The woman's age, their health, lifestyle factors, the underlying cause of their infertility. Why is it that they're not able to get pregnant? So for some women, they might be able to get pregnant with IVF a lot easier than others because the underlying cause was something simple. Maybe it's just like low progesterone, which is sad to think we went through this whole process. And the issue was just like, we gave you some progesterone, you would have been able to get to that end goal of having a baby.
Right.
So anyway, it looks like the rate of success ranges from like the 20s to the below 50, but I'm not seeing anything more than 50 for the first time pregnant. It looks like after the first round of IVF, if it's successful, the success rate goes up into the 60s. I wonder though if that's controlled for the underlying cause of the infertility again. So again, if someone their underlying cause of infertility is somewhat minor, quote unquote, if you will, they do IVF, they get pregnant because, again, it was something like progesterone or tube blockage, like something that didn't really impact the ability to get pregnant to such an extreme. But then, of course, the second time they did it, well, they're much more likely to get pregnant again and have a life and have a baby because their underlying cause is still there, but it's somewhat minor. So I doubt that it was controlled for those factors when they're taking effectiveness ratings. So, okay, so what else the other part, then you brought this up and too, is that emotional part of IVF. So yes, we have that desire. And this is a conversation that, as an NFP teacher, was the harder conversations to have with couples, and I worked with one couple. I love to have them on to share their story. They really wanted to have a baby. They really wanted to have a baby the old-fashioned way. And we worked together. And they tried, and they went, and they had I'm pretty sure she had surgery, and they just were not conceiving. And they felt we prayed together every time, and to sit with her in that sadness and to sit with her as she cried and to see her husband, trying to support her um, and to be there, in that, to be with them in their suffering is uncomfortable, especially for nowadays. People have just gotten worse at that, Emily. Like, that's just so, you're uncomfortable. Like, oh, where's my phone? Like, distraction, something like, get me out of this discomfort.
Absolutely.
And instead to sit with her and to just be kind of helpless. Like, as an NFP teacher, I can't guarantee that you will have a baby. Like, I am not that powerful. I will do what's in my purview to help you achieve a healthy cycle so that you can achieve a pregnancy. But I also have to admit, I don't know what is God's plan for you.
Right.
I don't know what God's plan is for you. And I can't support you in going gung-ho. Like, baby is the goal no matter what. That's why I always like to frame it as like, healthy cycle is the goal. Like, let's get you as healthy as we can, and then let the chips fall where they may. Right. And recognizing, like, maybe a baby is not in the way that I'm imagining it, in the timeline I'm imagining it, is not what God has in store. And sitting in that sadness, right? And like we all have experienced that, I think. If you have a relationship with God, you know the sadness of letting go of your dreams in order to surrender to God's plan. It's only in that, like, when I can finally let go and accept whatever, then I'm going to have peace. And I think IVF is a example of our desire gone astray. This healthy desire for children is wonderful. But this expectation that I am owed a child, and even amongst Christians, right? But God says, be fruitful, multiply, have children, that God will give you the desires of your heart. Oh, I am not having a baby. IVF must be my solution. In my opinion, IVF is a way that desire is kind of like, you're taking advantage of people in a vulnerable state.
Absolutely.
People are in a vulnerable state and they really want a child. And you're saying, well, fine, I'll just give you that end product. I'm just going to plow over, your feelings. I'm going to plow over the reality of what we're doing. I am going to take control and we're going to make this baby happen.
We are all created with dignity. And when we take that, or when we decide to pursue something like IVF, we are saying, as adults, we deserve this baby. And you take the dignity out of the baby. The baby deserves to be created the way it was intended to be created. And so from the moment that everything begins, you're taking away their rights that they deserve from the moment of conception. And so it goes against so many things that apply to our lives, as far as, the golden rule, treating others as we would want to be treated. We have to treat that baby as equal to us. And in the act of IVF, that's not the case.
Right. And I think it goes back to, just like with NFP, we talk about, that desire. Like, it just takes self-knowledge. It takes a lot of, it takes self-knowledge. It takes, like, just slowing down a little bit, in that. But I totally get this, because my husband and I wanted to have a very big family. And it took us 4 years to have Max. And so, and then almost 4 years to have twins. So I don't know if I was ever tempted to go the IVF route. I think because I knew about the effectiveness rate. I just, I knew all of the things, taking babies in a petri dish. Like, I just wasn't willing. I wanted a baby badly, but I just didn't feel willing to, like, go to any lengths in that regard. Like, I really got what the church taught. I understood all the ethics. I understood what those artificial reproductive technologies were, IUI, the implanting, the insertion of sperm. Like, well, my husband would, I just knew all of the things. It was like, okay, that's just not even an option, really. But I still felt that sadness of, okay, well then maybe this is not in the cards for me. And I feel like nobody says that nowadays, Emily. Even amongst the Christian circles, I don't hear a lot of priests saying that. I don't hear a lot of lay people saying that. I hear a lot of like compassionate, like, oh, I understand why you would go for IVF. Like, and I understand that too. But I feel like we also have to say, like, well, what if it still feels like it comes with this understanding or this idea, this expectation that I am supposed to have a child. I'm supposed to have a child right now, and I'm just supposed to have a child. And it's like, I'm just trying to insert the option out there that, like, maybe not. Emily, it's hard to hear that. It's because we were at the pool last night, and I was talking to a friend because, we found out that we weren't pregnant this last cycle, which I was okay with because I got my period and healthy, and we would have loved to have a baby, but we're not pregnant. And I told her, she was asking me about how I was doing. I was like, I'm actually doing really great. And I don't know if that's just because I've been here before, and sometimes it's easier than others, right? Kind of depends on the season. Who knows? Maybe next cycle I'll be super bummed.
Absolutely.
But for this one, it was okay. And I think I remember that point when we were trying so hard to get pregnant with Max. I remember Joey and I very, very vividly at night, we were sitting on the couch talking, and we both just came to this realization, like, we wanted to have 10 kids. Like, we wanted to have a lot of kids, and came to this realization, oh, wow, maybe God has something else in store for us. Because at that time in our life, we were really involved in campus ministry, and like, we were doing this like babysitting ministry for families at our parish, right? So we weren't getting paid, and we would just go babysit for them. And we were like really involved, like giving of ourselves as much as we could. And we felt very full in that. And we could see how, wow, like the Lord, we could see the fruit of our love in that, Emily. That was when we had that conversation of like, okay, is this how God is going to make our love fruitful? We can totally see that. Now we're still going to keep trying to have a baby, but like, yeah, there's just this contentment, this awareness of like, maybe God has a different plan that still is going to bear good fruit.
Absolutely. And we often think of fruit as babies, right? Like, that's just what we naturally think, but our marriage can be fruitful in many different ways besides babies. And that feels so contrary to the way the design that, for couples and marriage and family. But yeah, we don't know what God has in store for each couple. And that can just be really hard. Just like you said, I understand how couples get to this point. And when I say this point, what I'm referring to is get to the point where they are so desperate, they want a baby, and especially when they're not being given any other options, regardless of money, it can be so easy, I would think, to take these next steps in order to achieve a pregnancy through IVF. And I understand that that desire and that longing. And so, I mean, I feel like we can't say it enough. We just don't know what God wants,
right?
What each marriage looks like when it comes to family. We don't know.
Right. And in scripture, we see so many different family sizes. And that's the beauty of your vocation, your unique marital vocation. God has brought you two together for a mission that only you guys can do, and He's got a plan for what the family is going to look like. And yeah, I don't mean to say, this is why I think it's important to have both of us talking about this, Emily, because you are a lot more gentle than I am. But I feel like that's where, sometimes it's like, yeah, it is sad, and we have to go through that mourning process, but you don't want to stay there. Like, that's where I just really tried to fight against that when I was, feeling so sad at that reality, that the mismatch of like the longing, the desire, and then the reality of like, okay, this isn't what's happening right now. And I really wanted to be like, okay, so how can I love today? What can I be doing today? Right? Like, to not obsess about it and get so preoccupied and focused on it, because that's what leads me down the path of sin and destruction, of like, I'm so fixated on, I have to have this specific outcome my will at all costs, and that leads me astray.
That's exactly how our society operates, right? So it makes total sense that people. I get the instant gratification because number one, for people that don't even know there's options to understanding the root cause or don't even think about that, like, especially when you're stamped with quote unquote unexplained infertility, you're not even thinking that somebody could give you answers because you haven't gotten answers. So it just seems like this is the natural next step.
Right.
So we operate out of, we deserve, we get what we want in this world most of the time. And
Right.
because most of the time you can buy the things that you want. And so it makes total sense that we're in this stage of the world, and the options with IVF. It goes hand in hand with the way we operate as humans.
I think it's also because having children is such a good, it's such a good thing to have children, to IVF, especially amongst Christians, right? IVF, and probably outside, people that aren't Christians looking at the conversation, you say, well, of course it's good because the end is good. The end of having a baby is a good thing. It's hard. Like, the means to the end matter. And that's what makes the Christian moral life hard, I think, is it's not just the end, but it's the means to the end. It's how I'm getting there. And demands self-sacrifice and self-denial.
But the good news is, once again, we don't know God's plan for every couple, but the good news is there is help for these couples. And with the immediate goal of having healthy cycles for the woman, right? So whatever is going on, the woman, we deserve to be healthy, and we deserve to have good medical care. And there are doctors out there that will do that. And that comes with
and
macro
I wanted
technology.
to say one other thing about that. So because there's, doctors, I think we talked about this, Emily, actually, when you were struggling to get pregnant with Isabella, is that there is also, like, keeping in mind that as medical, I don't know how to describe this. So medical advances come from studying. So the treatments we have available now are because people have gone before us that didn't have those treatments. They were the ones that were suffering. They were the quote unquote test cases, if you will. They were the ones that doctors were learning from. And now we have a treatment, and that people don't have to suffer anymore. And there's solutions, and there's medication, there's, lifestyle, whatever. They found the gene, like, there are solutions to those problems. But, and thanks be to God for those people, though, that went through that suffering and they didn't get to see the solution. But because of them, now we have a solution. And I really wanted to bring up that point because we talked about that remember you were talking about charting and how you were really good at charting with during your pregnancy. I think this is what we were talking about. Do you remember this, Emily? I think we were talking about this. So you were charting during your pregnancy, and we were talking about, or maybe it was before, I don't remember, but we were talking about what we were doing. We both were, I was at breakfast one day, and we were talking about how, wow, like, we might not see the fruit of what we're doing. Like, we are providing our charting patterns matched with our diagnoses to these doctors to study and to learn. And then maybe it will be the next generation that will bear the fruit, because there'll be a woman that shows up that has, your condition or my condition, and they've studied us and they know, oh, here's the solution. And so now the next generation of women, they don't have to suffer. But we did not get the fruit of that knowledge. And that's just how this all evolves. That's just the normal process. And that's amazing, but it's the reality. And I think that's also something else that's not talked about now, is like, well, maybe we're just in this season of learning, and if we don't go the shortcut, right? The shortcut of IVF, if we pressure, quote unquote, our doctors, we challenge our scientific medical health professionals to say, no, I'm not getting pregnant, and you need to figure out why, because this system works for a lot of people and it's not working for us. So find the why. Take your time and do your job and find the why. And maybe that means I will never have a baby, but you will find the why with me or with another woman. And in a couple generations, that why will be answered. And then we will have the solution and women won't be suffering anymore. And that's another conversation. No, I don't want to be the woman who's that woman. I want to be the woman in a couple generations who has the answer, who has her baby. And I feel like that's an opportunity for us to be so courageous and bold, you know? What do you think?
Absolutely. For me, it gave me the strength to keep going. If I could think about perhaps, God willing, all the people that could be helped just from the discipline of charting and, whatever God is doing with my body in order to help other people, whether that's, the treatment I received for different things going on. I have to trust that he uses everything. All things work for good for those who love him. And so that gave me a lot of motivation to keep going regardless of our outcome. I just remember after it felt like we had exhausted most options with our doctors, and before getting to the St. Pope Paul VI Institute, I remember my husband Josh saying, "Emily, regardless of what happens, at least you'll be healthier." And I totally had peace with that in the moment. That's not what our desires were. Yes, we wanted that as an outcome, but we also wanted a baby or babies. And but it's true. Overall, I was healthier. I am healthier to this day because of things that I had treatment for. And so I'm so thankful for that. So I am hopeful that however those surgeries went, whatever that looked like, the treatment that I received, hopefully based on my reaction to that medical treatment, they will then know, oh, we could do this, or we could use this in order to help another couple achieve.
I think that's, to sound very much like a modern day feminist, I feel like IVF is just an abuse of women's healthcare. It's just all the artificial reproductive technologies, and just, maybe this is a gross generalization, and it probably is, but it's just a way to say, it's too complicated. You're too complicated. We don't have the time to invest, let's just do this because this is something easier and we understand this. And that's just something that we as women, I think, and as couples should reject. No, you are a doctor. I mean, it's kind of insulting to the medical professional too, Emily, right? Like, you went to all this school, you're super smart, you're a scientist. Like, shouldn't you be interested in finding out, like, the answers to complex medical problems? Like, that's why you don't just like go in to get your script pad and like you come in and you were just treating symptoms. That's like, no, like, let's dive in, find out why, use your brain and all your training, and like, let's do that. And there are doctors doing that. Emily has said that there are doctors doing that. There is a whole movement of restorative reproductive medicine, and we want to talk about that, but we have to do that on the next episode because we're out of time. So let's say that we'll do this. It'll be a 2-parter. And next week we'll talk about and provide them with a lot of solutions. And there's a lot of hope out there. But let's just leave this, I think, this time with knowing that if you are in a season where you are struggling with your reproductive health, with your cycle, you're wanting to get pregnant and you're not able to get pregnant, know that there's so many other women in that same boat. Emily and I have both been there. We don't know what the plan is for you, but we understand all of those feelings. We've had all of those feelings. And I think that the best way forward is to know that there's other solutions, there's possibilities, and to pray for that, that peace, that rightly ordered desire, right? Because we want to have peace. God's will is not rushed. It's not confused. It's not chaotic. It's a path of peace. Anything else, Emily?
Absolutely. I just want women and couples to know that there's hope.
For sure. All right, guys. So we'll see you next week. We'll do the second part of this. Bye, Emily.
Bye.
That wraps up another episode of the NFP Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found our discussion enlightening and empowering. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Please connect with us by sending us an email with your questions and stories to thenfpshow@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with more insights, tips, and heartfelt conversations about natural family planning. Until then, love responsibly.